Lawyers of Reddit, what was your whole IT moment where you knew you would win? I trapped a defendant pretty badly one time. He testified in a depot he had a green arrow for his left turn and that my client ran the red. Unfortunately for him, the additional turn lane arrow was installed 2 months after the wreck. Case settled for policy limits a week later. I'm not a lawyer, but I took my old landlord to court when I was in college. They stole my security deposit over bullet. They claimed I trashed the place, not knowing that I took pictures and video when I moved in and out. Their evidence was a VHS quality recording of going through a perfectly clean apartment in better condition than it was when I moved in. But then they opened up the top of the stove and found a single piece of elbow macaroni under it, holding up triumphantly. That was the crux of their defense. The judge was not amused and I got all my money back plus my lawyer fees and the filing fee. She then fought against her own lawyer to avoid paying him. Asshole. Edit. Anytime you move into a place, take pictures, take video, make notes about any damage, and you move out, do the same thing along with noting any repairs you made. Pretty hard to argue against solid evidence. Protect yourself. I was reviewing the transcript of an interview with a child. The child made incriminating statements against my client. At one point, when discussing the allegations, the child used an odd word, but I didn't think much of it. A few days later, I was watching a video of a child interacting with their grandmother, who hates my client, from about a week before that interview. The grandmother used the exact same odd word in the exact context the child later used it. At that moment, it became clear that child had been coached. It was the first real aha moment of my career. I worked on a case involving defective processors. In discovery, we got emails from the defendant's engineers that had worked on the processors. They were in an Asian country, but the emails were in English because they were going to US executives. One of the more senior engineers basically laid out the exact defect we were suing over, explaining what the problem was and why it was their fault, and finishing with "this is big problem. We ship crap to customer." Needless to say, we hit them over the head with that in mediation, and they settled shortly after. I had a client who was accused of taking a young woman's car and then crashing it, fleeing the scene. The girl testified at trial that she had given him the keys that night because she was drunk and would never, ever drink and drive. Apparently she was not aware that I had requested and obtained a copy of her driving record which showed she received a DUI a month after the incident. I still remember the look on her face when I handed her driving record to her and said, "Except for that one time you got caught a month later, right?" The look on the judge's face was equally memorable. It wasn't a trial, but during a deposition on a case where two former employees decided to start their own company in a very niche market, but decided to make their plans on company laptops they unsuccessfully tried to break. One of the defendants was the one being deposed. She said she answered to a higher power than the company. When pressed on what that meant, she said herself, "That got reused prominently at trial. Because multiple people have asked and finding a clarification in the replies might be annoying. There isn't anything illegal about wanting to leave one company and start your own. The problem was how they did it, which was trying to poach existing clients while still employed, which breached their fiduciary duty, particularly of loyalty. I believe we also went after them for intentional interference with contract, as they weren't trying to solicit new clients for their business, but rather trying to get existing ones to break their contracts with our client. Using the company laptop to try to do it just made it way easier to catch them when the company IT guy found all the emails. And for privacy reasons, I won't say what industry it was, but to the person who asked, no, it was not a high-end escort service. I've never had to deal with one of those. I did have to ask a witness once about a sugar daddy website once, though, so that was fun. Not a lawyer. Years ago I had to do something at a strip mall in a bad part of town. Took me about 20 minutes and then I found that my car had been towed. Ubered to the tow yard. Giant sign says cash only. Had to call another Uber, drive to the ATM and back, and pay them $300 some bucks. Got a handwritten receipt that, believe it or not, was itemized. Went home, googled, found that they violated the law in 3 separate ways. towed illegally refused to accept credit cards, and had multiple charges that the law called unreasonable, like dolly fees and load unload fees. Took them to small claims court. The judge began by asking the tow yard owner about his relationship with the property owner and how the decision was made to tow my car. Oh, the slimy tow truck dude answered, "My cousin works there. If he says tow, I tow. It's 100% legal." The judge's eyebrows begin to rise. But, the dude continued, "But what I detest the most, Your Honor, is this arsehole claiming I don't take credit cards. I'm a businessman. I take credit cards all the time. He's a lowlife that does not have any credit cards. That's why he wanted to pay cash." I was having a whole IT overload, and the judge saw me smiling and hopping in my seat and patting my manila folder of receipts. "Do you actually not have any credit or debit cards?" the judge asked me. I pulled out my wallet and showed him, and then I pulled out a time-stamped photo of the cash-only sign I took the day of, another one I took the morning of the hearing. The guy mumbled something like, "Okay, you got me there," and then had nothing but hug. I didn't know that when the judge asked him about the legality of each unreasonable itemized charge. Anyway, each violation pays double the total tow charge, and since there were 3, that's how I made $1,800 on a $300 investment. I'm a trial lawyer. I have a ton of these. My favorite was probably a DUI where the cop was in a BWW with my clients watching a fight. Like, the cop was standing at the bar in full uniform. Then when my client walked by him to leave, followed him out. Client was only actually going to his car to grab his phone charger because he was going home with the bartender. Like, he hadn't even closed his tab yet. Cop arrested him and charged him with DUI for opening his car door. Then fabricated this story for his report about how client got in car, turned it on, and began to pull out of the space to leave the parking lot. He also denied being inside the BWW, on the stand, under oath, to my face. Surprise. I talked to the bartender at BWW and got the security tape. It very clearly, like surprisingly good quality, "Don't try to steal from a BWW BTW," showed cops standing at the bar, watching my client walk out the front door, then follow him 30 seconds later. Parking lot cam also showed client barely touched the door handle before cop stopped him. Edit. Buffalo Wild Wings. I apologize lol. Edit 2. Since a lot of people are seeing this, I'll add, the cop underwent an internal review where the board determined he hadn't done anything wrong. A few months ago, he murdered an unarmed man while on patrol. He also trains new cops now and tells young college girls he pulls over to call him Tommy. Bit of a soapbox. Cops don't need a reason to lie about what you say, do, or didn't say do. I read hundreds of police reports. None of them are 100% honest. Cops lie under oath all the time. This story is just fun cause I got to prove him wrong and save my client from a conviction. If you are stopped by a cop for any reason, make sure you know your rights. Do not offer information. Do not consent to a search. Do not have lengthy contact without a lawyer present or asking if you're under arrest. Not a lawyer, but I played one in small claims court. My lease had an exit clause that said if I fronted 2 months rent, they would work to lease my place and return anything unused. I checked with the office ahead of time. They ensured me there was a waiting list, so I gave them the 2 months and moved. They never returned a dime. I talked to the new tenant and confirmed they moved in a week later. In court, the judge was commenting on how he didn't see anything explicitly saying they would return any unused rent, even though that intent was stated to me a few times. Dumbo from the leasing office piped in with, "Your Honor, in almost every case we can return some money, but in this case we didn't have a tenant in the 2 months after he left." So she gave the case back to me and I presented the affidavit from the new tenant confirming the move-in date. Judge awarded me double what they owed. Turns out leasing office numbers 1 and 2 thought they could lie to me and return my excess rent money to themselves. My client has been keeping her son away from the father because the father has a new child. She is concerned that her son will act violently towards the new child and she could be held liable. Judge, that's not even a defense. It was my 3rd month of practice. I was in family law at the time, representing mom in a petition for a restraining order against boyfriend dad. At issue in the broader case was child visitation. custody, support etc. But today's hearing was just on the RO. We had pretty good facts, but it was mostly based on testimony of the parties. My client was way more reputable as a witness, so I was feeling confident. 10 minutes before the hearing, my client shows up. I give her a last minute prep on what to expect, and then she says, "I'm glad I'm going through with this. I can't deal with it anymore and he's just getting worse." To top it off, he left me a drunken, ranting voicemail on Saturday. "You have your phone with you?" "Yes." We play the voicemail and it's a full 2 minutes of ex-boyfriend screaming it like I should have ducking killed you when we were together. "You were always such a bitch. I hope you burn to death in a fire." I didn't have time to ask her why the duck she hadn't said anything to me about the voicemail before the bailiff called our case. We sit. The judge asks if either side has additional evidence, and I ask for permission to play the voicemail. Ex-boyfriend, who didn't have an attorney, didn't object. So I played the whole nasty 2-minute rant in open court. Judge goes, "We're going to take a brief recess before I issue my ruling. If the parties want to meet and confer in the hall, they are welcome to." Boyfriend knew he was ducked. We settled the whole damn case then and there. My client got her wish list in terms of custody, supervised visitation, child support, plus the restraining order, to boot. Not a lawyer, but we had no evidence that a woman who slammed into my stopped car going 85 miles per hour was drunk, until she indignantly admitted it on tape in her deposition. She busted into my deposition and demanded she go first because I was a lying itch. She excitedly told my lawyer that the police report was wrong because it said she was coming from the movie theater when she was actually coming from her friend's bar. "Did you have anything to drink at your friend's bar?" "Of course." "How many drinks?" "I dunno. They just keep my glass full." "Did you take any medicine that day?" "Methadone and low blood pressure medicine." "I see." The cops had refused to breathalyze her at the scene because her husband was a firefighter that they knew personally. They told her to go home, sober up, and go to the hospital later. I heard the whole thing but had no proof until she handed it to me. They settled same day. My client was accused of brutally murdering a dog. Cop testified that there was no testing of the blood, no body ever found, and admitted it could have, in fact, run away. The eyewitness said she could see the killing down the hallway from the dining room. Cop testified there was no hallway and the dining room was on a different level of the house than the killing supposedly took place. Then the person who was leading the lynch mob against my client around town for the last year testified that she had been in the apartment between the two visits by the cop to evaluate the scene. No body, compromised crime scene, witness who couldn't see anything, and admission that there was no proof the dog was dead. Closing argument lasted 3 seconds. "Your Honor, I'm asking for an acquittal." Edit. My first award. Thanks. For those who asked, this was in Canada and received a fair bit of media attention prior to trial. Not exactly a knew you would win moment, but I got a hidden shout out from a federal judge in a ruling that I consider to be one of the high points of my career. Here's what happened. Before a hearing for an emergency injunction against USDA, I was watching the hearing before mine, a trademark infringement case. At the end of that hearing, the judge accidentally used a pun and could not stop laughing. She was literally crying. I decided at that moment I was going to intentionally use a pun in my hearing. I dodosely accused USDA of engaging in a shell game by illegally diverting some federal funds to an egg industry trade group. The judge called me on it, but laughed heartily. My client won. The judge threatened to put the Secretary of Agriculture in jail. A major newspaper reporting on the case said the judge winced at my puns but agreed with my arguments. False. When the written ruling was issued, the last sentence said that an injunction was issued against USDA's use of the funds for any plans they may be hatching. Undeniable shout out. Ian Albert, a friend of mine, was a DWI attorney in New York for a while. He was defending a guy who was asleep in the backseat of his car while intoxicated and a nice trooper arrested him. On the stand, the trooper testified that he visually saw the key in the ignition. My friend gave him like 3 chances to walk it back. "Are you sure, trooper, that you actually saw the key in the ignition?" "Yes, counselor." When a cop calls a lawyer counselor, he really means asshole. And then my buddy dropped the hammer. "You are aware that my client drives a Toyota Prius?" Bam. Edit. 13 hours later, For all the people pointing out that there's a spot for the fob in the dashboard of some Prius models, etc., you have to understand that in a court of law, words have meanings. Ignition is most certainly, specifically defined in Nye's law as being what we all commonly understand as the ignition. The point is that the trooper, since their main duty is traffic enforcement on the roads, are expected to be experts on the cars. Also, he lied on the stand. He wasn't mistaken. He made it up and got caught. Yes, in NY, having the keys on your person while in the car is being under control of the vehicle and thus can be arrested for DUI. But you can't sever the perjured testimony from the rest of the case. He lied. He got caught. My buddy moved for immediate dismissal, and the DA didn't argue. Case dismissed. Nothing happened to the trooper. As to why the trooper did this, promotions and overtime. Imagine you're running the entire New York State Police. You have about 5,000 troopers. What metric do you use to gauge how effectively they're performing their tasks? For the most part, troopers ride alone. So trooper number 1 drives around all day on his shift and issues 0 tickets and makes 0 arrests. Trooper number 2 manages to issue, say, 5 tickets a day and makes a DWI arrest 4 times a month. You're going to assume that trooper number 2 is doing his job. An aggressive officer is one that has a lot of tickets and a lot of arrests. Also, court appearances are almost always on overtime. Police unions are very specific about overtime pay rates and when they apply. If you're an effective trooper and you write lots of tickets, you're going to be in court a lot at 1.5 your hourly rate. Sometimes 2.0 your hourly rate, depending. Also, anal has long been internet speak for I am not a lawyer. When I compared the scanned copy of the deed provided by the other side's lawyers to the original my client eventually got around to providing, the scanned copy provided by the other side had a witness signature. The original did not. I clerked for a judge and we had a low-level thief in our courtroom who had robbed one of his neighbor's houses in the winter in Colorado, and all the police had to do was follow the footsteps back to his house where he was hanging out with the stolen items and a small amount of drugs and a itty handgun. Idiot. Edited for clarity. My mom hit a guy on a bike with her car in a parking lot. She claimed he hit her. She also wanted to countersue the cyclist for scaring her. In her deposition she started every sentence with "when I hit him." Not lawyer, but represented myself in court. Got a parking ticket and contested it due to misleading signs. Took a bunch of pictures and brought it to court. Judge agreed and dismissed the case. Hold up. What about the towing fees, I asked, as he was about to read the next case. Got those back too. Obligatory. Not mine but my mom's story. She was fighting for custody on behalf of the father, trying to prove that the kids were living in subpar conditions with their drug addict mother in spite of the ample child support provided. It was a tough case because courts are so hesitant to pull kids away from their moms. Then the mom burst out that she had been feeding the kids cat food as proof that she wouldn't let them starve. Needless to say, the judge didn't take that as a good reason for the kids to stay with their mom. Not a lawyer. I was a volunteer family advocate. I worked with families who were falsely accused of child abuse. Part of that was going to court with them. Full stop. Full stop. I was contacted by a family whose children were in foster care because of parental drug use. The family claimed that they didn't do drugs and that no one would believe them. Full stop. Full stop. They had a court-appointed attorney who did nothing but tell them to stop using drugs. Full stop. Full stop. I honestly didn't believe them. I was pretty jaded. I told them to request their case file for me to review. Full stop. Full stop. I was surprised when they called me back and had the case file. I met with them and went through everything. I noticed claims of drug use, court findings of drug use, but no test results in their paperwork. I told them to ask for the results. Full stop. Full stop. Long story short, the caseworker wouldn't give them the actual results, and the lab wouldn't either. Full stop. Full stop. So, I drug tested them myself at a different lab. They tested clean. Color me shocked. Full stop. Full stop. There were 4 months to go until the next court date. Every time CPS drug tested them, they went right after to the other lab and did a second test. All clean. Full stop. Full stop. I told them to tell the lawyer beforehand that if CPS claimed any dirty drug tests, to ask in court for the test results. He didn't want to. I was starting to get mad. Full stop. Full stop. So, the day of court I had a stack of clean drug test results in my bag. The lawyer wouldn't even look at them, and he was openly hostile to my presence and involvement. Full stop. Full stop. Court starts. I had been in this judge's courtroom before with other families. The CPS supervisor stands up and says that the parents have had 12 dirty drug screens in the past 6 months. The lawyer actually did ask her for the results. She said she didn't have them with her. Full stop. Full stop. I got the results out of my bag and handed them to the mom who was next to the lawyer. She tried to get him to take them, but he ignored her. Full stop. Full stop. I got so agitated that the judge said, "MRS. Baez looks like she's about to have a stroke. What's going on?" Full stop. Full stop. I stood up and explained that we had clean drug tests taken immediately after the mandated ones that CPS claimed were dirty. I briefly explained that the parents had tried getting copies of their results and had been refused. I said that the parents had consistently denied ever using drugs and had clean tests to prove it. Full stop. Full stop. The judge ordered CPS to provide copies of all the drug test results at a hearing in a week. Full stop. Full stop. At that hearing, the case was closed and the children were released from foster care. The family never got an apology from anyone, but they were too traumatized to pursue it. They packed up and moved away within a month. Not a lawyer, but I'm currently in a custody battle. Mother is saying I can't be trusted because I've been refusing to take our child to the therapist. The therapist testified I couldn't bring our child in because therapy must have both parents' consent, and mother has retracted consent. I can't believe I'm about to use a not a lawyer loan, but here goes. Lol. Tried to sell my home myself and the buyers wanted a term period for land contract before getting their own mortgage. I agreed to 1 year. Had a simple contract drawn up and after we both signed it everything seemed fine. Within 30 days the present me with their own legally drawn up land contract that was pages long to protect their investment. About page 3 it very clearly stated that if for any reason the home burns down, purchaser will receive all insurance proceeds. First, I still had a mortgage and the proceeds would legally go to pay that off. Second, that's a pretty targeted thing to say. Not lawyers' terms of the house being destroyed, and it's surrounded by woods and waterways. Just if it burnt down. Page 4 stated that this would remain a land contract until my mortgage was paid in full, so they'd never buy outright. I returned it to them with a letter stating those two things were never happening and I wasn't signing. They stopped paying so I began eviction. 6 months later the lawyer I hired was an idiot and I'm sitting down with their lawyer myself. He brings out the contract they'd tried giving me and began talking about their ironclad case due to the agreement. I asked him to show me my signature. The look on his face when he realized it wasn't there. After we talked it turned out he knew them and wrote the contract without the burn the house down stipulation. Seems they added it, and under the belief it was a long-term land contract. Not only did I win, I'm pretty sure they lost a lawyer friend. Very abbreviated, I was prosecuting a convenience store owner for luring a young girl, who regularly came into the store, back to a part of the store to grope, fondle and kiss her. Child enticement. It was the only section of the store without surveillance camera coverage. They were in the back room for about 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Per the timestamp on the videos, of the many arguments the defense put on, one was there was no way there was enough time for anything to happen. In my rebuttal on closing, I asked the jury to imagine what could happen in the room in that amount of time. And I asked them to all close their eyes while I timed out 2 minutes and 17 seconds on my watch. In silence. After about 60 seconds 2 of the jurors started crying. Knew it was going to be guilty right then. My client was riding his motorcycle on a relatively calm street when this guy exited his garage, without looking, and run over him. In deposition, the guy brought a witness that was with him on the passenger's seat the whole time. The witness maintained that my client was driving too fast and that there was no time to brake the car. I asked him the same question a few times in different ways, making him tell the story again. In the fourth telling, P. Already a bit frustrated. Let it slip. Look, I've already told you. We were exiting the garage and as soon as I lifted up from getting my cell phone on the car's carpet, wait. So you didn't even see the crash? There was no coming back from that. I knew the cops beat up my client and framed him. They described a knife in his possession that caused them to fear for their safety. Oddly, they never seized it. We won the criminal case and filed a civil rights case. While deposing one, he described the knife in detail. No more than 3 minutes later, he slipped up and claimed his partner told him my guy had a knife, but he never saw it himself. I told him, "That's not what you just said," and saw him panic. His lawyer panicked too and asked to see me outside. When we got in the hallway, I withdrew my settlement demand, and the case settled for a substantially larger amount within 45 minutes. The plaintiff was being deposed in the lawsuit she filed alleging sexual discrimination. She was claiming her boss had made some inappropriate innuendos and overtures. The defense attorney asked her if when the alleged statements or events took place, was she shocked? No. Was she offended? No. Was she damaged in any way? No. So why exactly are we here? Well, honestly, I'd rather not be. Meanwhile, her attorney stared straight down, scribbling notes, doodling. We ended the deposition there and asked her attorney if this was going away now. We got a call later offering to settle for $1,000 and a letter of apology. My best guess is she was pressured by a friend or family to talk to an attorney and the lawyers ran with it without really talking to their client. This was actually fairly recent. I was in a deposition of a fact witness to an automobile accident in which my client was killed. The defendant's attorney had called the deposition and over the course of an hour and a half or so elicited a lot of testimony which seemed to place my client partially at fault, which would impact my client's financial recovery. After sitting quietly for an hour and a half, I asked less than a dozen questions, the last of which was about the specific location of my client when he had first seen them. Based on his answer, it was clear that my client couldn't possibly be at fault. I sent a follow-up letter that same day and the case had settled within the next 2 weeks. Moments like this usually happen at bond hearings for me. It almost never fails. If the judge starts by saying something good for our side, he's going to deny bond 9 times out of 10. But if the judge starts by saying things like how these are some serious allegations and although he's not prejudging the case, there seem to have been some bad decisions made, etc., that's usually just the judge trying to put the fear of God in the defendant before granting bond so he'll behave while out on bond.